Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi, and today we've taken the show on the road. We are in the Derby football locker room, joined by two Derby legendary football players, the great number 40 legendary running back Jimmy Lewis, and all-state lineman Jeff Gabianelli, the great number 76. And gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's an absolute honor. You know, growing up as a kid, those were some of my favorite years watching football. Before we, talk about your careers, what does it feel like to be back in this locker room after, so many years? Probably like 25 years now, right?
Yes, it definitely brings back memories, Mike. I haven't been back here probably since a few years after I graduated high school. But it's good to be back, and it definitely brings back some memories.
Does it make you want to get back on the field right now and buckle up?
I am actually looking around for my pads to see if they're still out, but I guess not.
Right. Jim, what's it like?
It's changed quite a bit. Our lockers were bigger. It's nice being here, though. It really is.
Right. Now let me ask you, Jim, we'll start with you. Where did the love for Derby football begin for you? I mean, were you a fan of sports like as a little kid, like 6, 7 years old?
Oh, absolutely. I lived down on Talmadge Street up into kindergarten.
Right.
And I can remember, hearing the microphone, John Pagliaro with the ball, and I mean, he was just absolute idol of me.
Right.
So I remember coming up to the field, looking through the fence and watching it. The players come in and out, and Bobby Orciano. There's some big names,
Right.
Derby football. So.
And now, was your family from Derby? I mean, did they grow up in Derby, your parents?
My dad was from Seymour. He played football in Seymour.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
my mom was from Shelton, so they kind
wow.
of met in Derby. So
So you're the lone Red Raider then?
Yeah,
Pretty much. When would you say, though, you decided you wanted to go out for football? How old were you?
Oh, I mean, we used to run around in the yard playing football all the time. So I was ready to play probably when I was 3,
Right.
running around. It was Derby, just big influence,
Right. Now, Jeff, you weren't able to play Pop Warner. You were always probably taller than every player on the team, bigger than every player. But did you have a love for Derby football? Did you go to games as a young kid?
Yes, as a kid, you go to the football games, and the one thing that always amazed me was the crowd that would be here watching the games.
Right.
And, you would hear the announcer say names like Bobby Orciano and things like that, and you just wanted to be part of that. You wanted to be part of the product on the field that the crowd was here to watch. So it definitely wanted you to play and become part of that tradition that was here in Derby.
Right. And guys, there were no lights in Derby when you guys were younger. So games were always Saturday mornings, sometimes Saturday afternoons, but basically Saturday mornings. So what was it like? I mean, you get out of school Friday, you got the weekend off. It must have been exciting though to wake up 7:30 in the morning to go watch Derby play. I know you guys were young, but I'm sure you were on that field by the goalpost over there, playing football with your friends.
Yep.
What was it like? I mean, Lou DiFilippo, during that time, Derby could not lose. They were just an unstoppable machine. What was it like going to Saturday games every weekend?
It was actually pretty exciting. You look forward to Saturday mornings. One, you see these guys coming out, dressed in red and white, and it was a great feeling. And then, you played football.
Right.
Because that's what we did. We played, we really, we watched the game a little bit, but we were really playing football and actually learning those skills.
Right.
So I'm surprised nobody got hurt over there. Yeah.
Right. But the place was packed. I mean, you had to get there early. If the game was 10 o'clock, you had to be there at 8 o'clock because parking, and the place was filled. I mean, why do you think though, guys? Here we are, 2017. Why do you think that's changed? It hasn't just changed in Derby. It's changed in probably every aspect of high school football. Why do you think people just don't go to the games anymore?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. Like back then, when I had said earlier, it was a big deal back then. The kids cared about it, your parents cared about it, the community cared about it. we would have a horse with the Indian coming down off the hill. We would
Right.
we would have the band playing,
Yes.
the drums, and that whole atmosphere really was conducive to a family type presence there, something you wanted to be part of. I think that slowly has kind of deteriorated and it's no longer there. Do the kids still have that passion to be involved? Maybe they do, but the parents need to have it as well, and the community also as well, to embrace the kids, to get them out there and stay involved in the sport. And it is just more than a sport. It really is. At least that's the way I looked at it growing up in Derby.
Right.
I think it's hard too. It used to only be like your mom, or well, your dad would work, or, and your mom would be home with the kids. Now, everybody really has to work in the house.
Right.
So, and the games are on Friday night. People might be working. And I think that might have an effect on it too.
True.
Right.
And you got to win games. It seems like if you're not winning games, people don't want to come to the game.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Now let me ask you, talk about winning games. When I was a kid, if I saw Derby lose a game, it ruined my day. Derby didn't lose a lot when you guys were going to these games, but when they did, did it upset you? Was it devastating? Do you remember those more than the wins? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I do remember the losses, and like you said, you weren't used to seeing Derby lose all that often. So, you were disappointed, but back then we were young, so
Yeah.
we were, like Jimmy said, not only were we watching the game, but we would have our own game on the side.
Right.
And, even though we lost, we'd be happy that
We won that game.
we won that game on the side.
Right. So it kind of made up for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the adults, it stays with them more than you guys at that age,
Yeah.
definitely. So Jim, I want to say you were probably, 9 years old when you went out for Pop Warner?
I was
Am
8.
correct? 8, okay.
Yeah.
And did you play on was it the Mighty Mites, the Pee Wees? What did you play your first year?
I believe it was the Pee Wees.
Right. And
I was really light, back then. So, going into freshman year at high school, I only weighed 110 pounds.
right.
So I was always, I think I was on the Pee Wees for 3-4 years.
And now
just
were you
'cause
running back always?
I was running back, and I played defensive back.
Right. And who were some of your coaches in Pop Warner that you played?
Buster Jadek
Right.
was one. It's hard to remember back
Carmen
then.
DeCenzo, maybe? I know he coached.
I believe Carmen was.
I even think Johnny Oko coached the little Pop Warner, didn't he, back then?
I believe he did.
Right, and I'm sure Jim Mascola was involved. I don't know if he was the director yet, but he was probably involved in some.
Jimmy was always around. Great guy. Just
Right.
he was big into
You know,
Derby.
one of the things with Pop Warner, I always bring this up. When you get to high school, coaches really can't focus a lot on teaching you technique or doing a lot of hitting. You can't get injuries and things like that. So you're really learning how to play the game in Pop Warner. How important do you think Pop Warner is to an athlete's development?
Oh, Jeff, you didn't play, did you?
No.
I'll take this.
No.
It's actually very important. You
Right.
learn a lot of, skill. You learn to play as a team, to
Right.
be a team member. And, just learning the rules of the game
Right.
is important.
Did you enjoy it? Because I know a lot of times when you're a young kid, you want to go home after school. You don't want to be bothered with, kids hate doing their homework sometimes, hate going to practice. Did you enjoy football at that point, or were you still getting used to it?
No, I loved it.
Right.
Since I was little, my mom was out there, my dad throwing me the ball in the yard.
Right.
Always playing with, when I lived on Talmadge Street, we had kids all over the place. We didn't have electronics back then, so that's
Right.
all you did was go outside and play.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we obviously always, idolize pro athletes, but Derby, I've said this many times, I've had like 3 or 4 Red Raiders that really stand out to me. As a kid, a young kid, Jeff, was there anybody that you idolized that played for Derby that kind of made you want to be on that football field someday?
Well, there's always Bobby Marciano back then.
Right.
The reason why I say him is probably because I felt like I almost knew him personally through his brother Mark. I was more friendly with Mark.
Right.
But he also lived close to my neighborhood that I lived in, and so I felt like I knew him personally, so I took like a little special interest in what he was doing and how he played. So you could say I looked up to him.
Right. And Jim, you'd mentioned John Pagliaro. Was
John.
he the guy for you?
He was probably number one in my heart, and then Bob Orchano. I mean, obviously
And what was it like watching those guys run? I mean, just going to the games. I think you were a little young when John played, but
I was.
You both were definitely like ready to go to high school when Orchano played. So I mean, what was it like watching him?
Well, we did watch him a little bit, but once again, we were on the field playing.
Right.
But I remember the Ansonia game, and Bobby.
I think he ran 2 back for touchdowns.
Two or three, and
he kept them in the game. Really.
Yeah. He had a great game. So.
Right. So let's talk about you're good at segue into what I want to talk about. Talk to me about the Derby-Ansonia rivalry. We're going to talk about the magical game in '85, but just talk about that rivalry, because one thing too, if I'm not mistaken, you were young kids. You really didn't see Derby beat Ansonia as kids that much. It didn't really happen until you guys were players. So Jeff, just talk about that rivalry. What was Ansonia week like, just being a kid going to Bradley School, and what was the feeling like?
You're right, it is a big rivalry. They're the next town over.
Right.
Growing up, you also have a lot of interactions with those kids. Through other sports, not only football, whether it's baseball or basketball, it always seems like you're competing against those kids the next town over.
Right.
So eventually at some point you're going to meet in your high school career on the football field. And I think there's a little bit of a pride factor in Derby, definitely, as well as Ansonia. And it's for bragging rights. It's for bragging rights.
Right.
We're 2 towns that take a lot of pride in all their sports programs. And if you are lucky enough to win that game, it definitely means a lot. There's a lot of pride involved.
Right. Jim, what was it like as a young kid? I mean, just, again, you said you were always playing football, while the game was going on, but what was it like being around it, the atmosphere?
It was a huge game, especially when Bobby was in school, because then we really, you're old enough to really care that we lost,
Right.
So it was big, but the week of Ansonia, just the practice intensifies,
Right.
Definitely.
Without a doubt. It's just, it's amazing. And we did know those guys.
Right.
Andre Holman, I was friends with him. He was a phenomenal player. James, all those guys from Ansonia.
Right. So now let me ask you both. Jim, I know you were very good at track as well in high school, but were there other sports you enjoyed playing? I mean, were you guys fans of the other sports as kids, basketball, baseball, and stuff like that? I mean, was football number one love, or did you enjoy the other ones as well?
Growing up, I played baseball, basketball, all the sports. I couldn't play football at Pop Warner because, my father took me to join Pop Warner.
Right.
Once I realized that I couldn't play with Jimmy or Ron Benito or the friends that I grew up with, that I would have been moved up to the next class above, I said, well, I don't think I'm going to do this then if I can't play with my friends. But I did. I always wanted to play, and I regret not being able to do that. I think I missed out on an important piece of the big picture. That Derby Pop Warner program is important. It's definitely.
And plus, I'm sure, you're seeing your friends play Pop Warner games, and they're playing every Sunday, and they're wearing the jerseys and stuff, and you kind of feel left out because you can't do it because of weight limits, and stuff like that.
Correct. I felt like I missed out when I did. The next day, come Monday in school, and these guys were talking about how many yards Jimmy had or how many tackles this person made. I'm like, I want to play. I want to be with those guys. But they were good about it. We all knew I was going to play my freshman year, and I think Jimmy and Ronnie and Steve Burns, I think they even drew out on napkins plays that I needed to learn and positions that I needed to know before I even stepped foot in high school. So it worked out good. But football definitely became my first love.
Right. Now, Jim, you mentioned how much you love football, but when the season's over and it's basketball season, did you play, and were you able to get into basketball and stuff like that?
I played. I was like the point. Actually, we played Bradley Braves, didn't we? And I was a point guard.
Right.
I was fast. I could defend. I couldn't shoot.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So, but I played basketball, baseball. We actually played Bradley School. We were on the baseball team together too. So
those things are special though, because it gives you something in school to look forward to. You got to go to school, and everybody gets bored with school, but you got something to look forward to, and you guys kind of talk at recess. If you're going against each other, oh, we're going to win tonight, stuff like that is really what makes being a kid special, is being involved in sports such as those.
All right. At recess, we played Kill the Carrier. I don't know if they could do that nowadays.
No, that's long gone.
Probably, yeah.
Right. So before we get into your high school careers, Jim, when would you say that you felt confident in your ability that you could be a good football player? Would you say it was 7th grade, 8th grade? When did you start to have the confidence that I could really do this?
I don't know. I think starting in Pop Warner, you know, I was I had decent speed.
Now, were you on good teams? Did you guys win a lot in Pop Warner?
We didn't win that much.
Right.
You
They
know.
did beat Ansonia a lot in Pop Warner.
Yeah, we
they
did.
They had success for
Yeah.
Ansonia, but you were confident in your ability that you could do this?
Yeah,
and be good at it?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, Jeff, going into 9th grade you're going to be able to play finally, but let me ask you, were you nervous never playing before? Did you think it would be a while till you could earn your spot? I mean, what was your mindset that summer of going into 9th grade?
I don't think I was nervous physically.
Right.
At that time, I was bigger than
most of the
ninth
guys,
graders
right.
at that time. So I wasn't nervous physically, but I was definitely nervous mentally. I didn't think I felt I was a little behind the curve, and I needed to catch up to where these guys were about understanding the game.
Right.
But
I think that's one thing that he lost out. He didn't, all the fundamentals of the game, and
Right.
But I mean, he turned out to be a great player. So.
Right. So let's get right into freshman football. And I believe John Oko was your head coach, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Oak or was it maybe?
back then, I think it was actually Wayne Luciani.
Right. And I think Oak and D'Onofrio were kind of were the
Yeah.
assistants.
Yes.
So just, Jeff, tell me about that. But, forget about the first week. Talk about the first time you did live hitting in pads. Were you confident you were going to be okay? I mean, did you kind of pick it up pretty quick?
The first time I do remember the first practice with pads, the first live practice. And I do remember saying, oh, so this is what it's all about. I think I like this. I think
Right.
I like this. But like I said, these guys were great. I think they wanted me to do well.
Right.
For the team to do well. That's how we were. We all really pushed for each other, and a lot of times they would pull me aside and say, Jeff, next time do this. And whether it be on defense or offense, just certain people would tell me, and then it didn't take long. It didn't really take long for me to understand the game.
Right.
But,
He was a natural.
Right. So now let me ask you this, Jim. Going into that season of freshman football, you guys had Chris King as your quarterback as your senior year. Your
Right.
junior year, you had Mark Saros. So who was traditionally your quarterback? Like that freshman team, who quarterbacked that year? Was it Pete Sackey maybe, or was it?
Was it Burns or Sackey?
I think our freshman team actually struggled.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think we had a 500 season.
Right.
We actually went through a couple of different people at the quarterback position. Pete Sackey may have started.
Right.
Maybe so.
And then I think even Nick Montini may have had a few games at quarterback, and as well as Steve Burns, I think. But we really didn't have that constant quarterback in our class.
Right. And now, Jeff, did you start right away, or did you have to earn a spot, or were you basically starting right away?
I started right away.
Right. Were you both ways, or just one way at the time, or?
Both ways.
Both ways. So basically, for a kid who never got to play, your first introduction to it, and you're getting to start both ways. So that had to be a good feeling, even though you couldn't be with these guys through Pop Warner. The fact that you were finally out there and playing, that had to be a great feeling.
Yes, and again, no one had to force me to play. I wanted to play. I wanted to play probably 2 years prior to high school, but so I was basically chomping at the bit to get in there, and I wanted to be there and play.
Right. And Jim, did you go both ways freshman year, or were
I
you
did.
one way?
I was a cornerback and then running back. I started actually at fullback, and they had Bobby Sobin as a tailback, and then they flipped us. And
Probably a good move, yeah.
yeah,
It worked out.
It worked out pretty good.
Let's talk about some of those players that, would be important players, not just with your class, but they definitely played a big part in that 85 team. You had Walt DeForest, who was a tremendous player, Cisco Salazar, Pete Sackey, who I think was also the kicker your senior year. There's a couple others I'm sure I'm missing, but, just a tremendous class. Talk about some of the players and how important they were to making this team successful.
Bobby Sobin was phenomenal fullback.
Right. Very
tough,
underrated. Yeah.
Yeah, tough linebacker. Actually, our senior year, I think he should have been player of the game in the Ansonia game. I think he had 2 interceptions and
Two touchdowns.
2 touchdowns.
Right.
Yeah, so Bobby was good. He was really good. Cisco.
Right. You also had Ron Benito, who was a good lineman.
Yeah.
You know, just a lot of good players. And there were players that were good, but there were so many players maybe a little better that they couldn't always find time on the field. But you always had good backups, too, if somebody went down. You know, I look at players like Mark Mezowitz, Andy Dune, guys like that.
Yeah.
They could step right in if somebody went down. So,
Scott Davis.
Yeah,
Right.
Scott Davis, right. So, I mean, did you see, even though your record wasn't great, you said you were 500, did you think, though, that, you know, you had a good feeling that when you guys got to be seniors, it could be a special group?
Yeah, I think so, because the guys that we had coming, you know, underneath the juniors, you know, played a good part of that too. So
I think we had a good core. We had a good core group of players. We just we needed some other pieces.
Right,
I think we were able to help the '85 team.
right.
We had players like that. We had enough good players to help the '85 team, but then in our season, there was enough juniors to help us. So I think we were just missing some pieces, but we had a good core group of players.
I think our class was pretty small. I think we graduated 93 people in our class.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's a lot more than, you know, when I was there. It was like 60, so it's not too bad. But, so Jeff, how would you evaluate your first season as a football player? Were you satisfied? Maybe the record wasn't great, but were you satisfied at how you did as a player?
I was. To be honest with you, I really wasn't too concerned about the record. I was just happy to be playing.
Right.
And happy to be starting on both sides of the ball. And I wanted to be on the field. I didn't want to come off. I really enjoyed the game. And that first year is probably where I learned the most about the game.
Right, and you know what I think helped you guys too, is a lot of your coaches were very young. So you kind of had young guys who could kind of relate to you a little bit, and they were, you know, Tommy D'Onofrio, he could be very energetic and fiery. You know, Oko, I think Oko was still very young then, you know, early 30s. And of course, you know, Wayne had been, was it Wayne you said?
It was Wayne,
right.
yeah.
Wayne had been with the program. So, I mean, you had a good group of coaches coaching you too, which I think was important.
Yeah, Tommy D'Onofrio was important. I mean, he definitely had a way of firing us up. And
Right.
off.
Yeah.
Looking back, he...
Right, and he was only a couple years out of high school, so I mean,
Yeah.
he was still new, and he could kind of relate to what you guys, you know, had to go through and preparate. Jim, how would you say your freshman season went for you individually?
I mean, it went good, but
Right,
it went good. Our record wasn't there, but I mean,
Right.
we definitely had some pieces in our class. You know,
right,
that I knew we were going to be good.
right. And
You
how'd
know,
you guys
coming
do that year against Ansonia? I mean, I know it's hard to
We lost.
remember.
Did we lose the
Right, right.
We lost.
It's hard
Right.
to remember back then because I was thinking about it. I was like, man, I don't remember. You know, I remember practicing and
Yeah.
but
Right,
coaches and yeah,
No,
it's
we
a long
lost.
time
We
ago.
lost.
Right.
Now we played them at Ansonia.
let's talk about the other rivalries that you guys play. I think, you know, for Seymour, you guys were their game. You know, Coach Sponheimer, I had him on, and he said that was the game he didn't want to lose more than any game was, you know, Derby. Talk about Derby Seymour, and then we'll get into Derby Shelton. I know they're not the same rivalries as Ansonia, but you still don't want to lose to them either. It's not a good feeling. Jim, talk about Seymour and that rivalry.
Yeah, it was definitely a big rivalry. We definitely didn't get, you know, as fired up for them as Ansonia.
Right.
But
Which I think is normal. It's hard to, you know.
We let Coach Sponheimer, and Seymour had good players, you know.
Right.
They were pretty good.
Right.
And Shelton, yeah, Shelton too. I mean, Shelton was a big school.
Right.
They had players to choose from, but we usually would beat them, but obviously we didn't beat them.
Right. They
Oh,
were,
yeah.
you know,
No, we lost.
they had gotten Bob Riggio, though, and he had become a great coach for them. And I think that was a big turning point for them because
Yeah.
he was a no-nonsense coach. He didn't take any garbage. And I really think that's when their program turned around. And unfortunately, it kind of turned around at a time when you guys were playing them. But Jeff, talk about Seymour and Shelton, how important they are, because Shelton's Thanksgiving too. You know, the turkey doesn't taste great when you lose to them.
No, I got excited for all the Valley teams that we would play. You know, Seymour, Shelton, Ansonia. Ansonia obviously was the biggest rivalry. I don't know why, it just seemed to be. It just
Right.
seemed to be. But I like playing Seymour. I felt a good rivalry there. Shelton was across the river, and we always would say that we got to beat that team across the river.
Right.
I like playing all the Valley teams, and I think we needed that. I mean, the Valley itself liked to see those games as well.
Right, and I think an important thing too is if you lost to an Ansonia, which is your biggest game, not that you're going to make up for that loss, but you have the opportunity to kind of make up for it by beating one of those teams. And if you win on Thanksgiving, I mean, it's the greatest feeling. I mean, the turkey tastes great, like I said. So, I mean, it gives you an opportunity to kind of bounce back from an Ansonia loss.
The other thing is, you know, we knew all these guys, you know, that we played with from Shelton, Seymour. So it was kind of bragging rights, you know, when you seen them out, you didn't want to, because we always talked about the games and, you know, and football, except football was
That's the
derby.
thing. People like tend to forget that we did. We knew people from Ansonia, friends of ours. They were friends. They played
Right.
for Seymour. They played for Shelton, and we would go out and we would see them around. And we would talk about sports and other things, but deep down, without telling them, you knew you wanted to beat them on the field. And that's the kind of rivalry it was.
Right, and those rivalries back in that day, there was hatred. Like, you know, now you get older and you kind of appreciate the rivals and you appreciate the people you played against. But back then you hated them. You know, if you saw them at McDonald's or you saw them at Dutch's, you were staring them down. You know, it was kind of like that game of human chess. You know, who's going to make the first move, this and that. But that's what those rivalries are about, because I think you have to have the hatred for the uniform, because if you don't, then it's not a rivalry.
Right.
You know, definitely. Now, freshman season comes to a close. Jim, I know you did track. Jeff, did you play any sports in the offseason?
I did. Freshman year, I played basketball and baseball.
Right. So if I'm not mistaken, freshman year, did you have Mo Monahan as your coach maybe, or was it?
Freshman year?
I think that was Ken you know, I think that was Ken Pereira's first year as the varsity coach. Maybe he had, I don't know, it could have been anybody. It could have been Oko, because I think Oko did definitely coach a little bit with Kenny. I think
Ken Pereira may have been the varsity coach at that time.
right.
I don't know. I want to say it was Chris Laverme. Chris
Right.
Laverme may have been a
I think
freshman
it
coach.
was. Now, did you enjoy basketball as much as football, or did you start to say, you know what, I want to devote more of my time to being a good football player?
I did. I liked basketball. I liked the pace of the game.
Right.
It was a fun game to play. But I wanted to devote more time into football, and I wanted to deal with a lot of the off-season weightlifting and stuff like that for football.
Right.
So basketball kind of went to the wayside.
Right.
Typically, Derby always had a mediocre basketball team, so to speak. So
They're good for 3 quarters, but they die in the fourth, you know. They would take over. Jim, I know you were great at track, but let me ask you, was track more for you getting ready for football, or did you just know you had the speed and you felt you should do it? Did somebody talk you into doing
No,
it?
I liked running baseball,
And what did you run in track? Was it the 100, 200?
the 100, 200, 400, and then the relays.
Oh, so you did a lot
Yeah.
of them, yeah.
But funny story, I don't know if Jeff remembers this, but freshman year, we actually both went out for the wrestling team.
we did.
We did.
right.
And we had our first scrimmage, and I think your mom dropped us off at the gym, and we opened up the door, and it already started. So we were like, "What do we do?" I think we walked home, grabbed the pizza, and that was the end of our wrestling
Oh,
career.
That was
so-
the end of our wrestling career.
And then you decided to try basketball for that year.
Yeah, well, again,
See, the one thing with basketball is you can never have enough players, so
Yeah.
coaches are going to take you, especially if you're tall. So, I mean, you know, you had that, you know,
Right.
fallback. on-
Yep. I think Jimmy and I tried wrestling because we were interested in the weightlifting program and the exercises that they did.
Just getting in shape. Yeah.
We quickly learned that wrestling is not something you just jump into.
Right.
I think you need some years and years of experience to do that on the
Right.
high school level. So, yeah, we had a short wrestling career.
Right. You know, I forgot to bring this up, so I'll bring it up now. Before we get into, you know, that first football meeting of your sophomore year, Charlie DiCenzo takes over for Lou DiFilippo your freshman year. So you guys go into your freshman year, your high school career, and Coach Lou has given his notice. He's stepping aside. Let me ask you, you probably didn't know Charlie that well yet, but you knew Lou was this legendary coach. Was it a little disappointing to hear that he was stepping down?
Yeah, I think so. I think he was our gym coach.
Yeah.
Right.
He was a tough guy. So
Right.
yeah,
I would have liked to play for Lou,
Right. Just to see what.
just to see.
Right.
what
I mean,
it
he was a
like.
larger than life person, and I mean that program. Let me ask you this: were you both? You guys were kids, so it's kind of hard to, say you were shocked. But were you surprised when you heard he had stepped down?
definitely surprised.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think he did it right after that Ansonia State playoff game. He came in that Monday, and everybody was thrown for a loop. But did you guys know of Charlie DiCenzo at that point, or not too much?
Just
No.
yeah, a little bit, not
I just knew who he was,
Yeah.
but I didn't know anything about him.
yeah.
Right. So now, usually they have those meetings in January, the winter. They talk about, the upcoming season. How nervous were the two of you going into that classroom that day for that first football meeting, knowing that you were now going to be a part of the varsity team?
So again, yeah,
Excitement,
Right.
I don't
Just
think we were nervous.
No.
You say
And
nervous?
Derby had come off a mediocre season, so there was definitely, the pressure to win and get back to where they wanted to be. I think they went 5-5. It was Coach DiCenzo's first season, so I know he wanted a better record. So, I mean, were there any nerves? I mean, did you guys know Jeff Rice? I mean, were you nervous to see him in that classroom? He's a senior now, and he's a tremendous player, things like that.
yeah, we knew Jeff pretty well, and Damian Carloni.
Right.
Those were our captains.
Yeah,
Right. And,
our sophomore year, those were
Yeah.
our captains, yeah.
and just great guys. I mean, Jeff
Right.
was just strong. I mean, he was always in the weight room.
Right.
I'd have to say there probably wasn't a lot of pressure on us
Yeah.
in our
Right.
sophomore season because we weren't expected to contribute on the varsity level.
Right. But I mean, were you
At that
nervous to
particular time.
go to practice and be with these upperclassmen who are great players? I mean, Jim, you're kind of, in a lot of ways, Jeff is kind of tutoring you as you're playing indirectly, because basically he's the starting running back, and then you also have Mark Orchano and yourself.
Right.
So, I mean, you probably learned a lot from him in sophomore year, little things, but, I mean, were you intimidated at all by the upperclassmen?
A little bit. Jeff ran me over, and I think he ran Danny Shea over in a red and white scrimmage, and I was hurt. He hurt me bad.
Right.
And Danny, he was down the field. He was hurt too. He got run over by him too. So,
Right.
yeah, Jeff was pretty intimidating.
Right.
He was a strong, powerful runner, Jeff.
Yeah.
And if you had a lot of times they would use us sophomores and just to plug some holes on defense when the first team ran their offense. So when you would
Right.
see him coming at you, that's when you would get nervous.
Right. So let me ask you both, as sophomores, was there one player, Jeff, that you kind of, I don't want to say idolized, but you kind of, learned a little bit from on how to be a better lineman and things like that? I mean, was there one particular lineman that stands out to you that, kind of motivated you?
There is. Damian Carloni.
Okay.
During practices, a lot of times I would be a defensive end and Damian would be first team offense, and I would go against Damian. And we had our battles. Usually he always won at that time.
Right.
But one time he pulled me aside and he said, hey, do what you have to do and work hard. You could be really good. And
Right.
that meant something to me. Back then, when an upperclassman like that pulls you aside and tells you things like that, it motivates you, it means something to you, and
Right.
gives you something to strive for.
Right. Now, Jim, let me ask you, I mean, would you say it's Rice that you kind of learned a lot from? I mean, was there another player that you kind of looked up to?
Jeff was definitely a powerful runner. I think my run, I wasn't that powerful, so.
Did he kind of take you under his wing or not particularly?
Not particularly.
No.
But I definitely learned a lot watching him, run and being dominant. So.
Right. Let's talk about some of the coaches. Let's start with Coach Charlie DiCenzo. I mean, you're sophomores, but I mean, could you tell that this guy would be a successful coach? I mean, did you think he had, what you needed to be a great coach? I mean, he's Type of coach that if he's yelling at you, there's a reason, but he also knows how to stay in control. Talk about Coach DeCenzo a little bit.
Yeah, I really have nothing bad to say about Coach DeCenzo.
Right.
He's the type of coach where he's very demanding. He demands that
Yeah.
you give your best, but in the same sense, you can tell that he also cares about you. He cares about you as a person on the field and off the field. He has some interest in how you're doing in school, just as well as he's making sure that you know the plays on the field. So
Right.
with the type of personality he had, it kind of motivated me just to do well for him.
Right.
Because I felt like he cared about everyone on the team. He cared about you in an individual way.
Right.
He was, he was like a father figure, pretty much to us. I mean, we definitely looked up to him. He, great coach, you know. So I think some of those other coaches were more disciplinary guys than Coach
Yeah.
DeCenzo was.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right though. They never yelled at you unless they had a reason
Yeah.
to. You know.
Right. And, you know, you could tell that he definitely impacted you as people, never mind players, because, I mean, you both made the trip. I mean, Jeff, I know you're in West Haven, but Jim, you've been miles away from Derby for a long time, and you made the trip out to see him get inducted into the Derby High School Athletic Hall of Fame. So that's got to be special, too. And I know he was very moved by when you sent him a congratulatory message.
Yeah, we played a little phone tag, and he
Yeah.
left me a great message. You know,
Right.
he, of course, Charlie doesn't want to take credit for anything.
Right.
You know, and he said, it was great players like you. He left me the message that, and all you guys that made him. So,
Right.
but he was a great coach.
Jeff, let's talk about John DeFrancisco, because you dealt with him a lot as a lineman and stuff. He yells, but you never really take it personally with him
No.
because he's a big-time motivator, and he just, he inspires you. His pep rally speeches are great. Talk about just playing for Coach D.
Coach D is definitely a motivator. He's the type of get-in-your-face kind of coach, but he does it to benefit you. Just like Charlie, he does it to benefit you. None of those coaches yelled at you
Right.
just to yell at you or belittle you. They gave you specific tasks to do and wanted to make sure you knew how to do them and you did your job correctly. I also had D as a baseball coach. And
Right.
he was the same way on the baseball field.
Yeah.
He really wouldn't tolerate mistakes. He felt he prepared you, go out there and do it the way he showed you how to do it and do it well.
Right.
But, sometimes he would get vocal, but in a good way.
Right. Now, Jim,
Yeah.
a guy I'm going to bring up, he had a lot to do with Derby's success, especially with the defensive backs, but a very good running backs coach as well, Frank Alou. Talk about Coach Alou and what he kind of meant to you and your position and things like that.
Yeah, Coach Alou was just, everybody loved him. He was one that would yell he would yell.
Right. And he was
But-
intense during Ansonia week.
Yeah, but he, he knew how to motivate people. Nobody ever put anybody down, really. I don't think. But
Right.
just a phenomenal guy. We looked up to all these guys like they were our parents because we were with them so much.
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe Coach Zuba was still there at the time, and another underrated coach. Did a great job coaching them. And I think that's why Derby was so successful. Charlie brings it up a lot. They were an extension of Coach Lou. They didn't try to change much. They just kept it going, and that's not always easy. You bring a new coach in, sometimes players, it takes them a year or two to get used to them, but it seems like Charlie just picked up where Lou left off.
Absolutely.
Right, definitely.
Absolutely.
Right. So talk about sophomore year. It was a great year for the varsity team. They went 8-2. Their losses were to Ansonia and Shelton, unfortunately. But it was a very good year in the sense that after going 5-5, they bounced back. Jeff Rice had another great year. But talk about you two in general. How would you say you played that year? You both played a lot of JV, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Jim, if I'm not mistaken, you were the JV player of the year that year?
Yeah, I was. I believe I was starting running back at JV, and I think you were there too.
Yeah, no, I played JV. I think at that time they may have had me at tackle.
Tackle,
before
right.
I switched over to guard. I played. I started tackle, offense and defense.
Right.
But JV was I think we had a great year. I don't know that I know we beat Ansonia that year,
Right.
and I don't know if we lost. I don't think
If we did lose, it could have been 1 or 2 games, but we had a good season.
Right.
We did have a good
And
season.
now, that was sophomore year, so who kind of quarterbacked that year? Was it Saros, I would imagine?
Yeah,
Yes.
Mark
Yes,
Searles was the
right.
quarterback.
Right. And, you know, another quarterback who had a great year that year for the varsity was Brian Oliver, very underrated player. You know, as we all know, Charlie is ground chuck, so he runs the ball a lot, but Oliver was very good that year. He would always get a big touchdown pass when you needed it. So, I mean, that was just a great team that year.
Yeah, he threw a lot to Tommy Abel. Him and Tommy Abel hooked up for quite a bit yards. You know, I think did he throw for over 1,000 yards that year?
I think he was very close,
Yeah.
yeah. So he definitely did, you know. So you guys came out of that season, though, feeling good about where you were going. And did you both have a good feeling that you would be in this, you know, Jim, did you have a good feeling you would be in the backfield that next year?
I thought I would be, but, you
Right.
know, I wasn't sure how Coach was going to run the offense. And, you know, he had me and Mark in the backfield. I think it was just us two in the backfield, I believe, that year.
Yeah, it was, yeah, you and Mark.
Yeah. I
Right.
think he threw Tommy Abel in the backfield for the Shelton game.
Right. And Jeff, I mean, did you have a good feeling that you could possibly find your way on the field, you know, whether it was defense or offense? Did you have a good idea that?
I was hoping I would be on the field, yes.
Right.
I ended up starting defensive end my junior year.
Right.
There was a lot of good players on that '85 team. We had athletes in our class and the class below us who couldn't get playing time because there was a lot of good athletes in that '85
Right.
class.
The offensive line was unbelievable. I mean, and we had size. Tom Fossey,
Yeah.
Right.
George Scarps, Tony Kapritsky. Yeah, it was a big.
That entire line was all, they were all seniors.
Yeah.
There was all
Right.
seniors on an offensive line.
You know, we know, guys, we're going to hear all about that team in part 2, but I want to thank you both for coming on today for part 1 of this segment. It was a real honor, and we're just getting started, and thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you, Mike. Pleasure.
And we're going to hear all about the 1985 Derby Red Raiders, as well as the 1986 Derby Red Raiders. Till next time, I'm Mike Kenichi for Hometown Heroes saying, good night, everyone.